Did you go to the movies this weekend? Of course you did, because this past Thanksgiving weekend was a historic one for the box office, with the box office raking in $425 million over the 5 day Thanksgiving frame, which is just absolutely nuts. And this is a large part thanks to the Gladiator phenomenon, as well as Moana Apocalypse, which I'm referring to as a Moananinomenon. But yeah, people were just really excited about going to the movies. AMC even had to create a queue to buy movie tickets. That's how much demand there was this past weekend. And you got a bunch of TikToks from theater employees who survived this weekend. It was insane, but it also bodes very well for the future of theaters. And I think it just goes to show you that no matter how much streaming can try, it can never truly recreate the experience of going to an actual movie theaters. So now diving into the movies this weekend, by far and away the winner was Moana 2. Moana 2 grossed $386.3 million globally in its first 5 days, which is an insane amount of money, and it will for sure join the $1 billion club. But this movie is so unique because it was originally supposed to be a Disney Plus streaming show, and to now have it released as a film, and not only that, but have it be breaking box office records set by Frozen 2, which is not too shabby. It just goes to show you the power of Moana, especially because this movie was the number one streaming film for years since after its release, and you can really see that really supercharged its box office. And I Moana 3 is most definitely now on the table, and we'll have to see how that live action film does, but people love Moana. Domestically, though, over the 5 day weekend, it did 225, which demolished the previous record of 119 million set by Frozen 2. And over the 3 day, it made $139.7 million, which is just so much money. I'm so happy for this film. It got an A- cinema score, which goes to show you that a lot of the audiences who saw this movie actually enjoyed it. And I think Disney was very smart to not lift the review embargo until right before the actual first screenings to the general public, because it wasn't long after those sort of negative reviews from critics, they were kind of washed away by audiences just loving the film and loving the character. And so I think that was, again, a very shrewd move from Disney, as well as I really do think that it kind of Moana 2 flew under the radar for a long time because of Wicked and Gladiator 2. The focus was on them being the next Barbenheimer, that no one saw Moana 2 coming as this big tsunami. I really don't think that anyone suspected it was going to be as big as it was, which is great. Moana 2 was largely supported by Latino and Black audiences, with Latino audiences making up 36% of the opening weekend audience and Black audiences making up 27%. It did skew largely female in the 71% range, which is to be expected of a Disney princess film. Also very similar female demographic to Wicked. And so it's nice to see that they can both coexist, mainly because I feel like they're targeting different demographics, because the audience for Wicked was surprisingly Caucasian. So I think that has to do with the Broadway nature of it. And it did skew a little bit older because Moana 2 is more for families and younger kids. But again, it's so interesting to see this phenomenon. I think this is very different from what happened with Barbenheimer. Moana threw everything into just like a rising tide lifts all ships isn't always necessarily true at the box office, but it was true this Thanksgiving weekend. And I am so glad, because all of these three movies are very well deserving, and I'm glad that they're doing well, and it means more business for the theaters, which is always awesome. Now, the next question is, how will Disney replicate the success of Moana 2? Well, they currently have Mufasa lined up for the end of December, which, very low expectations for that film in terms of quality. And I think that is very similar to the expectations that were had for Moana 2 prior to its release. So I am excited to see if this will be another Moana size hit, because let's not forget that The Lion King, the original live action adaptation, it made a lot of money and it broke a lot of records. So I wouldn't be surprised if this film actually does really well. And add a bonus of having Barry Jenkins as your director, which I mean, I have full faith in him that he can survive in the corporate sphere that is Disney and make something that's actually really good quality. But again, that film is going up against Sonic 3, which those are a lot have a lot more in common in terms of the audience. So it would be very interesting to see if they cannibalize each other or if they both can rise. Like we saw this past weekend with Wicked and Gladiator and Moana 2. There's also Kraven the Hunter, which is a bit of a question mark. Will it be more Venom or will it be Madam Web? We still don't quite know, and I think once the review embargoes lift and once we start seeing people's reaction to the actual film, we'll get a better idea of that. But it's just very exciting to see that we could potentially get a mini version of what just happened in just about a month. Talking about Wicked, Wicked is killing it at the box office, especially domestically. Overseas numbers are a little softer, but that tends to happen with films that are really strong domestically. There's just not always the same thing translates. It's really big in the UK and the US, but everywhere else a little bit soft. That being said, it is at 359.2 globally, which is not too shabby at all, and it could potentially hit the $1 billion club. If not, I feel like it'll come really close, especially because of how long legs it's going to have at the US box office. It dropped only 29% in its second weekend for an $80 million 3-day and a 5-day of 117.5 million. People are loving it. There's a lot of repeat viewing happening for Wicked 2, which I think is really going to drive this film forward, and it could potentially drive it all the way to the Oscar stage. And I'm not just talking nominations, I'm talking potential wins. We'll have to see. Most definitely, Ariana Grande is very much a front runner for Best Supporting Actress, as well as Wicked for Best Picture. I don't know if it'll win, but this box office sure does look good, and the Oscars are looking for more ratings, so this could be a way to solve that problem. Also, something that a record that it just broke, it is now the highest grossing musical based on a Broadway show, surpassing Grease, which has had the record for almost 50 years, almost 5 decades, and not a single film could surpass Grease until Wicked. And I'm sure it will just be a matter of time before Wicked Part 1 is surpassed by Wicked Part 2, especially because if the excitement continues and it rakes up these awards noms and wins, there's no saying what can come next for this franchise. Gladiator 2 did solid business. I think it's just kind of seeing what's left over from Moana and Wicked, although it does lean more male, not as much as those two films lead female, but still a good amount. Gladiator 2 had a 30.7 million 3-day and a 44 5-day with a drop of only 44% this last weekend, which is a really strong, healthy drop for a second weekend for a big blockbuster. And I think that globally, it's where it's really going to make its money. It's at 320 global. So definitely people overseas love Gladiator, and I'm not shocked. I do suspect that we'll get a Gladiator 3 and we won't have to wait 24 years for it, but that is still kind of a long ways away. I think that this could be a success, call it that, and have a good day with that. That being said, now that we have this weird phenomenon that just happened, a lot of the question on the industry, we saw how Disney could potentially do it next with Mufasa. I personally think that Encanto 2 would do boffo at the box office because it's, again, a film that did okay when it released in theaters originally, but it's really just been supercharged. It's always at the top of the Nielsen ratings when it comes to hours viewed. So I think that if they wait a little bit and release a sequel in about a year or two, it'll do boffo business. And especially if they bring back Lin-Manuel Miranda, I think that's a lesson that they learned from Moana 2. Imagine how much more money it could have made if they brought Lin-Manuel Miranda back. I'm just saying. But I think the next couple of potential little events like this that will happen, you have Paddington 3 and Captain America 4 coming up the same weekend. You have Lilo and Stitch and Mission Impossible: The Last Reckoning, which I'm actually, when I was looking at what was coming up in theaters next to see if there was any potential Glicked and Moana 2 combo, that actually really called my attention because I think that they really complement each other really well for some reason in my head. But something that's a little bit more comparable is Thanksgiving weekend next year. You have Wicked Part 2, you have Zootopia 2, and you have The Running Man, which could potentially fill in that Gladiator 2 spot. I know Running Man is kind of relatively new IP to film. But Edgar Wright is really a great director, and Glenn Powell's star is rising, so I think it could operate at the levels of Gladiator 2, if not a little bit below. But still, I think it fills in that male centric spot for these other family friendly and female friendly movies. So potentially, we could see another record breaking Thanksgiving weekend next year. We'll have to see. Those were like the biggest stories for this box office weekend. However, Christmas is very much on the horizon, and people are feeling it because Red One and the Best Christmas Pageant dropped under 5% each, with Red One dropping 2% from last weekend for a number four spot, with a total of $12.8 million, and Best Christmas dropping 4% and taking that fifth slot at the box office with a total of $3.2 million. Now, these are very far away from the main event, that is Glicked and Moana 2, but I think it shows how people really like Christmas movies and potentially giving them more options in the next coming years. I would not recommend doing a $250 million budget film with Red One because despite it doing solid at the box office, is still, I do not think it's going to break even. But this does have a nice little, it is a nice little headline for Dwayne The Rock Johnson, who has two movies in the top five this box office weekend. What was this weekend's big box office news? Did you go see a movie? What movie did you go see? Should be the better question because I know you were out there. And what was your experience like? I bet I personally saw Moana 2 last Tuesday, so I kind of missed the whole big party that was happening this past weekend, so I can't wait to hear more about other people's experiences going to the movie theaters this weekend because I'm sure it was nuts. And if you're a theater employee, I hope that you get the recognition you deserve because you did it. You survived this Thanksgiving weekend and you did it with style. I'll be back soon with some more box office and some movie reviews, so stick around.